again.
Hello.
We get to meet again. Can you hear us, madam?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, absolutely. Welcome. Okay, we'll get straight into the script. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is a huge welcome to all our listeners across LinkedIn because we're streaming this live via LinkedIn. A big welcome to each and every one of you. Did you want to say something, madam? Okay.
Yes, so I'm
Um,
getting feedback. Hold on, it's either.
but can you hear me clearly? I like to believe you can hear me. If you can, please just confirm so I can proceed.
Yes, I can hear you now. I think I was getting feedback, but we're fine now.
Oh, okay. So that's sorted. Okay, good. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to this fantastic episode of your Lend Your Voice 1000 Voices for Autism series, proudly brought to you by EK Foundation for Autism. It's an avenue and opportunity for us to have conversations about autism and just in our own little way amplify these conversations and talk about best practices for people living with neurodivergent disorders, autism in particular, and how best they can navigate living healthy lives and perfect livelihoods for themselves. Today's conversation is titled Early Childhood Development Navigating the Path to Growth with Autism Spectrum Disorder. My name is Epic. I'm your host for this what promises to be a very, very engaging conversation. And I'm joined by two exceptionally amazing ladies. I'm going to do a little bit of introduction. We're going to start with the lady to my, not literally, but yes, to my right. We're joined by the amazing Madam Shakira Enyola Olajobi, who is the CEO, Brainy Educare Services, amongst other things. I'll let her do the in-depth introduction by herself. Madam Shakira, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Epic. It's great to be here. Hello, everyone.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. I understand how
Thank
schedules
you
can
so
be
much.
very, very tight, and thank you for making time to be part of this conversation on a Thursday afternoon. Literally, I understand that you have
Yeah.
work and all that, but you have joined here. It's a clear insight to understand that you recognize the importance of conversations like this, and we genuinely appreciate that.
I'm
But
happy to be
but
here.
Shakira,
Thank you for inviting me.
Madam Shakira is not alone. We're also joined by the amazing Miss Madam Oguamaka Wana again. She's kind of a familiar face. I remember the last time I had her, it was an in-depth conversation filled with deep knowledge, and it was so good we had to have her twice, basically. Madam Oguamaka, you're most welcome.
Yes, thank you, Epic. Really excited to be here again and to have hopefully another great conversation.
I'm confident it'll definitely be another great conversation because the first one was great. We brought you back, and this time we did you up with an even greater personality. And yes, today's conversation is early childhood development, navigating the path to growth with autism spectrum disorder. And I want to attack this conversation head on because I personally really believe that this is a very important aspect for people living or parents taking care of children or discovering their child have autism, right, or living with autism spectrum disorder. The big question, which is I'll start with Madam Shakira, if you do not mind. The big question, which is one thing that parents are usually most scared about. Can a child who has just been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder grow to be the best version of themselves? Madam Shakira, please let's start with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A child who's just been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder can maximize their potentials and can do amazing things. And this is not just my words, this is what we also see, what we find. A few days ago, I read the news about a young man who just got admitted into MIT, you know, to do one of these tech courses, and he is non-verbal autistic. Non-verbal, doesn't even speak at all. So that tells you the extent. And with early diagnosis, it makes it even better because a lot of these challenges or symptoms can be well managed and the individual can be helped to excel. So indeed, it is very possible. By no means is the diagnosis a doom call or anything like that. It is just a call to action for something to be done very quickly, because indeed we also have situations where several children do not ever get a diagnosis and nobody knows clearly exactly what is wrong with them. At 16, at 17, I don't know what is wrong. She's always been like that. But if there's a diagnosis early enough, it's a good news, and everybody should just set to action. Parents, teachers, everybody around the child, because yes, there's still a lot that can be achieved, that should be achieved by that individual. Thank you.
Well said. One of the most key things that you have addressed or made mention of is the fact that you have said the early diagnosis is a call to action, which is what I genuinely love, because I personally wanted to start with a conversation, because when one common phenomena when people parents bring their child and child's diagnosed with autism, there's this consciousness of doom that overwhelms them from time to time, and they're like, where can we go for? But I love the fact that you have said it's a call to action. It's a call to action to get to work, because there's work that needs to be done that should follow that up. I'm going to bring Madam Makare in real quick. We want to extensively address early childhood development in general. Now, I want your own idea of what early childhood development looks like holistically, and how and what it means for a child living with autism particularly. Right? I want you to touch a little bit about early child development for neurotypical children, and specifically what it means for a child living with autism.
ECD, early childhood development. Typically, that's from when a child is neonatal, so right, still in the uterus, up until they are about 8 years of age. I mean, some would define it to about 6 years of age. And those years are the most critical years of a child's life. That's where you have rapid development going on physically, socially, emotionally, mentally, and those kind of form the building block of how this child is going to turn out and who they're going to be like, right? From an adult, you can typically kind of gauge what kind of upbringing they had, what kind of early years that they had. So those years are very sensitive, highly. And when you look at the aspect of those years, I talked about the social, the emotional, the cognitive, language, physical development, addressing each kind of category to see how well a child is growing. I mean, we typically have milestones to sort of gauge, of course, that's kind of an average perception and every child is different, but just to make sure that we're sort of moving along this train until we kind of even out and spring into adolescence and adulthood and moving on from there. For a neurotypical child, that whole milestone sort of disappears because now it's a kind of a whole new world. Those milestones were curated for, I hate to use like the term like typical children and the typical children, because it just feels like, oh, one is this way and one is that way. I mean, all children are special, but like the average child, growing child, will go through those milestones. But for neurodivergent kids, especially with autism, it's a different conversation. Now we have to know, where do they fall within the spectrum? We have highly functional, we have low functional autism. Within the low functional autism, what are our goals? What are the milestones? What is it the typical within this atypical behaviors that they're exhibiting, how can we kind of get them on that moving path, right, in that developmental space. So knowing where your child falls within the low or high functioning is the kind of the set in stone. And then, okay, how can we have goals for this child? How can we say the child is going to 4 years old, like an average child at 4 is already speaking, is already, expressing themselves in some way. They see an adult and they are running to the adult and asking them a bunch of questions because they are very curious. But for an autistic child, that would not be like a milestone. For example, if they're on the low functional, where they are just sort of in their own world and doing repetitive exercises and not really trying to be social or having that empathetic skills. So in that way, maybe your goal would be how do I get my child to tell me the basic feelings, like how they're feeling at a time, like if something is hurting them, how can I how can I understand their safety in that way? How can they just tell me how they feel personally? And that's a goal where they're able to identify those feelings. And then you'd have different forms of therapy or different ways of communication where, you have pictures and they have to, pick the sad face for when, they're not feeling so good, or the crying face or the smiling face when they're happy, So then you're thinking of how well can I help them communicate with me. But I hope I've not kind of gone too much outside your question of what that early
No,
childhood looks like for children in general and neurotypical children, neurodivergent children.
no, you wonderfully said. And I think while we were talking, something dawned on me, which prompts this follow-up question, which I'm about to ask you, because I think you particularly about stated some of the major differences or things to notice from the typical, and as you said, something you don't like to mention a lot, typical and typical children. There's a common conversation that happens, right, when it comes to outrightly saying that this child is different. Um, Within the autism space, we agree that autism does not look the same on every child. It's not a one cap fits all kind of thing. Everybody has individual personal traits. But same thing with typical children, right? How can parents, caregivers, tell that this is can how can they tell this is a personal, individual personal trait, or these are early signs of autism? How can parents who are, because parents notice these things in children, and for some they're confused, for some it's denial. Are there any clear signs that they can outrightly see and state that this is an early sign of autism? This is just a personal trait attributed to that child. They will outgrow it, because it's a very tricky box. This phase. How can parents navigate that properly?
That's a great question. It's when you'll be working with parents, um, it's sensitive because the whole topic of autism or having an autistic child, it's something that if you're not in that, you can't really understand. And I personally empathize with families who are working with children or other members with autism. And so you always have to come from a place of empathy and kind of trying to imagine what the parents are going through. For the parents on that end, I'll want to encourage them to not be afraid, because I think fear kind of makes us oblivious to what's obvious. And deep down, you may feel like something is off, but you're like, it's so scary, I don't want to open that kind of worm. And what that does, it delays whatever. We know the secret is early intervention. I mean, every day is precious. So the more time you waste in diagnosing, working through the phases before you come to the point of acceptance, you should, the earlier the better. So when your child is exhibiting behaviors that you may have questions about, be curious, lean into that curiosity. His 2.5 year old boys, what do they typically look like. They're and that's why you have to kind of get confident with resources, and for those who don't really have access to these resources, of knowing what a typical behavior is. Not just, yeah, you can see observation is one way to gain knowledge. I have nieces, I have compound children. I know when this boy was 2, I know when that one was 2.5, I know what they are doing. And now, kind of, this is where I would say comparison is allowed, because they're like, don't compare people, but compared to how your child is developing, is there a difference? Is the difference wide? And then that's you leaning into that curiosity. Who can I talk to? Is this normal? Everything is arranged. Even that milestone is arranged. They're like, oh, your child by age 1, your child will know 50 to 150 words. You know what I mean? So a child may be more verbal than the other, but the child, or your child, knows some words. So you cannot totally say, oh, we're out of the range and there's a problem. But just having that landmark would allow know how far away, and then you lean in, you ask a professional, okay, are we all good, or is it just he's taking his sweet time? You know what I mean? And then they look into it, and it's only then that you kind of get that verdict of, okay, it's been 3 years and he hasn't said a word. There's definitely a problem, because no matter how different kids are, at 3 they're going to have words regardless, because they're social beings. They're interacting. Even if they don't have siblings, they're interacting with their parents, their caregivers. They should have words. And so that should be a concern. That should be a red flag. And then define what it is, and then start problem solving, solution oriented.
Lovely, lovely. Well said. Well said, madam. And I appreciate how you have pointed out the fact that it's very important that you should source for resource materials, right? Beyond just doing that, recognize when it's important to talk to specialists. And that's very important. Important decision to make in the life of a parent and when it comes to your child, because a lot of times people, I know that we're living in a world where Nigeria particularly, we like to be spiritual about some things, and we shy away from, we shy away from doing the necessary and seeing specialists when necessary. And but it's very important, as you have addressed, to recognize when to bring in somebody with better experience and sometimes compare, because that would definitely go a long way. And Madam Shakira, let me talk to you for a bit. We want to now we recognize that as follow up on what Madam Maka said, right? We recognize that these traits might prompt, we can tell some slight differences between neurotypical and neurodivergent children, things that should prompt that concern, right? Let's address something you said earlier at the beginning of this conversation: early diagnosis. I think people do not overemphasize how important it is when it comes to ensuring that a child who is living with autism grows adequately. How important is early diagnosis for a child?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'm going to get right into it. But before I respond to that question, I want to say thank you to Amaka for the previous response. And I just want to add a bit to what she said. So, part of the signs that parents and caregivers need to look out for early, because I mean, you probably won't get a formal diagnosis until the child is about 3 years old. But the truth is, you can see a whole lot of things before age 3 if you pay attention. The very first, I think, most obvious thing that you would observe is that the child does not look at you. So basically, autism is a social communication disorder. This means that majorly, yes, it is a spectrum, meaning that it has a wide range of features. It can exhibit in this way or in this way or in this way or in this way in different children. But it's generally a social communication disorder. And then it means that social skills and communication skills are mostly affected. And we communicate verbally and non-verbally. One of the most basic non-verbal ways of communicating is eye contact. So by the time a child is around 6 months, you should be able to play with them, meaning you look at them, you call their names. Hello, Chichi, how are you? You smile, they smile back at you. When a child isn't looking at you, when a child isn't smiling back, those are the first signs to look out for. By age 6 months, a child should be blabbing of some sort. This might be delayed to about 8-10 months. A child should be able to say like gibberish. When a child is not making all of these sounds, a child is either mute or not making these sounds, or maybe just funny, atypical sounds, then you want to start paying attention. By age 1, the child should be able to make out words that you can hear. Like they want water, they might say, Ada, Ada. You already know they're saying, I want water. But a 1-year-old isn't saying this. They're not responding to their names. You know, neuroscience has taught us that through repetition, we learn. By the time you say a child's name like 500 times, the child should know it's their name. And depending on environmental exposure and stimulation, children will typically reach that point around 6, 8, 10 months. But if you have a 1-year-old who cannot respond to their own name, you're calling their name and they don't even know you're calling them, then you want to start paying attention so that even before a formal diagnosis, you can already begin to put some things in place. And then that takes me to the question that you asked, that how important is early diagnosis? Extremely important. So when a child is born with about 200 billion brain cells, 200 billion. But as adults, as you and I are here, we probably have a couple of hundreds of millions, because naturally, when a child is born, for every neuron are like new plants. For every neuron that is unused, they wither and die off. So the first 1 year of a child's life are the most magical years, and the next magical is 0 to 3, and the next magical after that is 0 to 6, which is why we call it the early years. So when we say early intervention is important, I can't say very, I would say very raised to power 100, if there's such a thing, you know, because the truth is, when you see that a child who's 6 months is not looking at you, is not smiling, is not blabbing, you can immediately start to do something. This isn't about medication or getting a diagnosis. Spend more time, because you see, there's what I believe personally, and my years working with children who are neurodivergent, is we all have a level of these things in all of us, but the environment that we are in determines to what extent we exhibit some of these features. So you see a child who's 6 months, who's not looking at you, who's not responding to their name and stuff. You want to enrich the environment better. It's just like you have a child who's malnourished. Just do more balanced diet and all of that. So for social communication issues, what do you begin to do? Begin to talk to this child, because, you know, in those days, it was almost impossible for certain things not to happen. But I tell you, in these days, it's possible for a child not to hear enough. There are children who will show symptoms not because of anything else, but because of lack of stimulation of this part of their brain. So imagine a family where it's father, mother, and this is the first child. So they do not even know what is typical. They can't compare, because in the neighborhood, they are in their own flat or in their own duplex. They don't even interact with the neighbors. They don't know what looks when a child should talk and stuff. And the dad is a tech guy. He's always on his laptop. The mother too goes to work. She comes back. She's busy. She's just, busy on. It's possible that in one day that child may not hear his name once or twice. Compare this to 20 years ago, where grandma will come around and say, hello, Chichi. Grandpa will come, neighbors, or a child who's got older siblings. So what do you then do when you observe there's something wrong? Enrich the environment immediately. Have conversations. I tell parents, have conversations with your child. Learning starts before a child is born. So go ahead. Your child is just 2 months. So what? Go ahead and have a conversation. Tell her or tell him how you're wearing this lovely pink dress or lovely red top for him. Oh, you know what, darling? Today I'm wearing you this lovely. Do you like it? Can you see it? Go ahead and have these conversations. What you're doing is you're starting therapy already, and these results are tremendous. You would see children who suffer from communication regression, and parents will tell you, oh, at 18 months they used to talk, but suddenly they lost that ability. That's because there wasn't stimulation. So early intervention is so important. And the magic of the results you get in the first 3 years, you cannot compare to later years. Let me just stop there so I don't take all the time. Thank you.
No, I mean, with the amount of impact you are dishing out, we don't mind extending time for you, madam. But that was beautifully said. More than anything, I like how there were significant reference points and examples that you had curated all through your rendition. I would follow up with some of the things that you have said, and you have addressed some very practical examples with which one can notice a child and can tell that a child questions should be asked and interventions should be looked towards being taken. But what are common misconceptions when it comes to early childhood intervention that are experienced, that people, some misconceptions and some ideas or some notions that are popular around, which are very wrong, but are very loud, that people now misconstrue and misconcept and call autism, but it's not. Because we tend to see these misconceptions. People tend to notice some things and all that. So I just wanted you to give us the opposite side of some of the things that you have said, so people are clear, so that false information that has lingered for too long is corrected at this point.
Oh, okay. So I would say that when it comes to neurodivergence, there are a million and one things that could be wrong. And there's also what we call global developmental delays, where you're querying a lot of things and you're not very certain what could be wrong. But what I see people do is once diagnosis is not clear or it looks, they just say, oh, the child is autistic. And then the next thing you ask is, oh, really? Where did you get a diagnosis? How did you know? So, yeah, he's not talking now. So what else can it be? Like, no, you can't just diagnose autism because the child isn't talking. Autism, sometimes the child will talk, sometimes the child will not talk. Like I said, it's a social communication challenge, and it's on a spectrum, so it can exhibit sometimes as sensory sensitivities. The individual may have issues with loud noise, sound, or light. Sometimes it could be as delayed speech or even no speech at all. Sometimes it could be repetitive behavior where the child is just repeating something like echolalia or doing something, maybe just turning a wheel and doing it over and over. So it might be repetitive behavior. So it's important that parents and caregivers should know that they can't self-diagnose. They need to speak to a professional. They should take the child to the hospital and get to see a specialist who can then refer, if necessary, to other specialists. Because you see, again, for autism, caregivers and parents must realize that they need to work in a team. It's impossible to just work with one or two persons. There's a very broad range of professionals that should work with autistic children. And like I said earlier, it's possible that we have environmentally induced challenges with communication and social skills, because again, as humans, we are social animals. We learn by copying. I can speak because when I was growing up, there are people speaking around me. And what we have in today's world is it's very possible to have a child who doesn't have opportunity to hear anyone speaking around because everybody is busy with their gadgets. And that's why we're having more and more environmentally induced challenges with social communication issues. So it's therefore important that we don't misdiagnose and just call everything autism. We should get professionals to diagnose properly. But you see, the truth is, like I said, we also need to start actively enriching our environment. We need to start looking for opportunities to socialize. We need to look for opportunities to have our children spend time with their extended family, in the community. We have lost what do we call it now? Community parenting, and we say that it takes a village to raise a child. It will always take a village to raise a child, no matter how much technology has done for us. We will always need our villagers to raise our children. So it's important to identify these institutions and allow the children to just be real, to just have the opportunity to grow. So whether neurologically induced as in autism, whether environmentally induced as a lack of stimulation or enriched environment, it's important for us to do something about what's currently becoming common, where children are not getting enough opportunities to be able to learn how to speak or learn how to behave. And the TV is not a socialization tool. I think it's important to mention at this stage, because sometimes parents will say, oh, but my child's always in front of the TV. They see people. It's not the same. There's something in Yoruba language where we refer to the TV as asoromagbesi. This in English means it talks without expecting a response. As humans, there's a different way we talk. We talk, we expect responses. And this, what it does is it helps children to understand the two-way communication. But with the TV, with the online, whatever, no matter how educative it is, it cannot replace you. They need real human connections. Thank you.
Wonderfully said. I think this is where I talk. So I saw Magbisi, literally practical. So it's my turn to continue to follow up the conversation now. So yes, but Shakira, thank you very much. I think those were very excellent statements that you have made. Following this up, it's very important that we recognize that it takes a community to raise a child. And I love the fact that you pointed out the TV is not the community that we are talking about. It has to be real life. In this case, I want to say social media too is not the community we're talking about. Coco Melon neither is not. We have to, these conversations need to happen with our children, and we have to expose children to real life conversation, because that is the only way that we can raise them right. To all of us watching on their LinkedIn and every other platform that this is being streamed on, if you have questions for our guests, please do well to drop them in the comment section. We'll follow it up, and towards the end of the conversation, we'll bring them up and just ask our guests as we follow up. So the goal is to ensure that this is as interactive and engaging as possible. So if you do have your questions, please share with us. Our team will coordinate that, and we'll definitely relay them to the guests. Maka, I'll come to you right about now. I wanted us to go a little bit in depth. I wanted to create a basic scenario following up what we had said extensively, and we talked about early intervention and early diagnosis and all that kind of stuff. We recognize at IFA we run an early intervention center, right? So it's one after diagnosis and assessment, you can enroll a child at our center, and we can do most of the taking care of and all that. But for parents who, because it is in an environment like ours, Nigeria, for a lot of people, the resources to afford therapy might not be available. Could you highlight some of the best early intervention practices that parents can adopt at home that have proven to be very effective over time, that parents can adopt at home that could help them before, or for those who cannot afford to immediately reach out to early intervention centers? Just best early intervention practices that can be adopted within the home space that parents can teach to siblings, and or they all can implement as a family.
Thank you, Epic, for that question. And before I answer it, I just wanted to say that if I had the clap emoji or something, I was just itching to use that while my co-guest was talking. But there was no way of me to like express how much I was enjoying and just how insightful your response were. Well done. Um
I
yeah. And then this question just hits home because at the back of my mind, I'm just thinking therapy, diagnosis, taking the child to a professional. I'm like, we are in Nigeria. Let's bring it home. And the reality of our state is that not
yep,
many
yep,
people can afford this. Many people have the knowledge to seek this. Not many. I mean, we're still trying to have we have zero dose children who are yet to take any vaccines at the age of 3. So even talking to people to get them diagnosed is a whole new conversation. And then the amount of healthcare professionals who are in line, who are in sync. There are stories of healthcare professionals who do not inform parents that their children have autism. A particular story about this lady, her child was, on the spectrum, and she noticed that there was something wrong. So she will keep taking him to the hospital, and the doctors are like, "Oh, it's nothing," or he will catch up. But the fact they knew that something was wrong, but they couldn't put themselves to tell her. And I'm thinking, what? If you don't tell her, who will you tell? Who will tell her? And how will she know? But no one wants to break the news. And it took a couple years until one doctor, called her aside and said, what your child has. Before then, she was just Googling and searching and she stumbled upon autism. So she's thinking, is this autism? Is this autism? So it's kind of prepping her mind for that. So when eventually a healthcare professional told her, it wasn't so much of a shock, but she was just like, why is she just getting it now? Why wasn't anybody telling her? And then she had to, she actually left the country to be in an environment that can support her child. Now she had to leave the country. She's a few of those who even have the opportunity to do that. Many are here who will not
have the
be able to
resources
leave,
to.
and they need people to tell them. That's the first basis. Healthcare professionals who are upfront and courageous enough to say it, because it's not a life sentence. It's not it's not even cancer diagnosis. You will have to tell your patient. So what's the fuss about hiding? Like, to me, that's unethical in the first place. But then the next level is, what do we do? Your child has autism,
ID.
you're low income, you're struggling with menial jobs, your partner is struggling with menial jobs, you have other siblings, school fees. What are we talking about? Intervention? Where am I getting it? You're giving me an invoice of this amount. It's impossible. So how do we care for children who are in communities that it's hard to reach with these interventions? What can they do? As a parent, I don't think you can escape knowledge. You can't. There's no way out of it. You have to kind of go through it. So we have to educate people about autism. Whatever mode of communication, language use, convergence that we have to do to get them to understand this situation, this disorder, this circumstance with your child. We need to do that. Once it clicks for the parent that things outside this milestone and this atypical behavior is something that needs your special attention, then we're in. Now, what can they do? I loved how you said the social factor, right? Because the overarching theme for people on the spectrum is communication and social difficulties, and that that's our core innate human human ability. And so when there's a break in that, what we're trying to do environmentally with intervention is feeling that, connecting with the child, trying to get them to sustain eye contact. They're going to look away and stuff, you follow them, you track them, you stay there, teaching them that this is how we communicate, right? And being stimulating, like the children love TV and social media now because it's highly stimulating, and we as humans can't really measure up with that. You're not going to be jumping for it for hours on long just to sustain your child, but make it quality. As a parent coach, it's something we always there's a strategy we always give to parents when they're working with their typical children in helping them build that language, which I think is transferable to even neurodivergent kids, is spending quality time. Let's face it, our world today is very distracted. When I mean quality time, I mean no external distractions, no technology, no side conversation, just you and this child uninterrupted every day for at least 15 minutes. And we ask parents to do at least 15 minutes, and it sounds like 15 minutes is so small, but research is pushing for at least 15 minutes, because you'll be surprised that little time is spent with children these days. Yes, we have 24 hours, but even 15 minutes, it's almost like we're pulling hair. I mean, continuous, uninterrupted quality time with this child. I think that's something we can start to do as early as 6 months, as early as they are born. Talking to babies. People don't talk to babies because babies can't talk back to them. I'm like, it's not for you, really. It's for your child. You're giving them, you're feeding that to them so that they can know what it feels like. It's called serve and return. I give it to you, you give it to me. Even though their response is, that's a response, and you take it. Oh, you want some, you want the book? Here it is. And they make a response. Oh, you're flipping the pages. Ooh, can you? Oh, it's hairy. It's hairy. It feels soft. You label things. You describe. For example, you give a child a ball. They're playing with the ball. You use your words in that moment. Oh, it's round. It feels soft. It's squishy. Look, it bounces up, down, up, down. It's pink. Here's a blue ball. Here's a pink ball. You're giving the child words, and you're helping them sustain in that activity, thereby helping their cognitive abilities to listen, to interpret, to think about what is happening, and it's fun. So we need high quality time with children, with rich language, description, labeling, eye contact, using our words, serving and return, waiting for that response and giving it back, and expecting and giving it back. So they learn the nuances of social, emotional communication. That's one thing we can practice at home, outside intervention, before professional medical type intervention. Another thing we can do in the home that parents can do is by looking more into nutrition. So there's research about how diet really helps with the behaviors of children with autism, because sometimes they can exhibit aggressive behaviors due to high stimulation and sensitivity. And sometimes there's research that shows that gluten, for example, is not really good for children on the spectrum, because it contains peptides that is absorbed into their system, which doesn't really do well with their state of mind and state of body. So you can explore, are there some foods that make my child more present, more calm, less aggressive? And then let's pursue that. And we always talk about literacy, right? If you're literate, then you can pick up a phone and Google, hey, Is gluten good? What kinds of food should I have? Maybe read some articles here and there. But if there's a knowledge gap, that's where we have to come in and even do more. Community engagement, workshops, speaking in languages that our community understands to pass that message, So I think all hands on deck, and we keep working at it and exploring ways that we can do it outside the normal, atypical ways of learning to really get to the hard to reach communities, because I think more light seems to be shed on that.
You touched two very salient facets of this conversation: nutrition and quality time. In fact, personally, as a grown adult, those are two things I need to always keep in check. But yes, and I like how you have pointed out it's important. The stats that you have mentioned, the stats that you have addressed, where you said 15 minutes with the child, it might sound small, but we are going to be shocked at how fast, how quickly we live, hustling and bustling in and out, in and out. And Madam Shakira almost said the same thing too. Parents are always up and about trying to make ends meet. For some who work in the system, spending so much time, you recognize how difficult it is to actually get quality 15 minutes, but still very important to actually find those moments. And I love how you have addressed both parts of this conversation: quality time and nutrition, very, very salient activities that can be engaged in to ensure that we are indeed attributing the necessary development to that child. Mam Shakira, let me talk to you for a bit because we are advancing in conversations, we're making some significant progress. Now, as regards early childhood development, we are making progress. We have spoken about the importance of early intervention, diagnosis, and this the first part of the conversation. Now parents are now we're presuming that parents are implementing that which they should, and these interventions are happening and milestones are being met. There is one part of this conversation that if you talk to any parent, they tend to talk about it, but publicly it's not usually addressed. It is managing expectations. And I want to talk to you. I want you to take this conversation for it because raising a child living with autism or living on the spectrum it's a very, very tasking activity to engage in, right? And it requires a lot of commitment from the parents and caregivers and everybody around involved in the process. We recognize this. While milestones are being set and milestones are being met, there is that in between, which is it taking longer to meet some milestones than others. How can we encourage managing a milestone being met, the development process in parents? How can we encourage parents to be patient with the development process, especially when there's scenario? For some parents who do not recognize how individualistic these interventions can be, and they say that I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried it twice, I've tried it for 1 month, it's not working. How can we encourage patience in attributing this towards the children?
Okay, thank you very much. It's not so easy, yes, and it's important that we empathize with families who are in this situation. We need more advocacy, and I believe that's one of the things that this foundation is doing. We need to have more conversations. People need knowledge. People need to hear stories. They need to hear experiences of other families, so they feel, oh, so I'm not the only one. Oh, so all of those things will also give them a peace of mind, because already the milestones are delayed, so they're already agitated. Some of them have lived so long in denial, it's staring them in the face. They're dealing with inertia. There's some things there, that are being imagined out of proportion. So it's important that we provide information in very simple ways. Maybe we need to begin to have video reels or radio adverts in pidgin and in our local languages about some of these things to help the parents manage their expectations. We also need to start paying attention to the emotional health of these parents, because you see, the truth is, with families who have neurodivergent children, autism inclusive, there's a lot going on for the parents. And in the kind of environment that we're in, people can be really careless with their conversations. Why is this your child not talking now? Why is this your child not walking yet? So people begin to hide their children. So many families with neurodivergent children will not take them out. They don't take them for shopping. They don't even put them in school. They don't take them to their social or even religious gatherings, because they are ashamed. And some of them have tried it actually, but they were battered seriously because everybody kept saying, what is this? Why is this child behaving like this? You have pampered this child. This child is misbehaving. This child is this child is that. So it's important, therefore, that we begin to pay attention to the emotional health of parents themselves. They are going through a lot, and we need to help them with the resilience, the grit that they would need to be able to navigate, because it's a tough road. They must be able to stand up for their children and say, I'm still not going to keep you at home, even though the last time I took you out, some people were saying some rubbish that they didn't even understand. But I'm going to go ahead and take you out again, and I will give them the response that they deserve. Of course, I'm not going to get bitter and start, but I'm going to let them know that, look, can you please allow us? Everybody has got a right. I think it was on LinkedIn, I saw a video of a man who took his child with special needs to a supermarket for shopping, and the supermarkets said he couldn't go in with her. That was ridiculous. But if every father would do that, if every mother would do that, and they would stop hiding them at home, eventually these people would have better and more inclusive policies. And then, of course, we also should laud it on social media so that we can have more people know about it, and we can begin to advocate for the things that really matter. Because the average person also doesn't know that these things hurt. When you're asking someone, why is your child not talking? You can't afford to be too careless with your comments. So I think that we need support, emotional support for the parent. We also need, in managing expectations, we will also need a kind of, would I say, community support, so that the road to getting to where they want to get to becomes easier. Because indeed, in managing expectations, there are some children that are on the spectrum that would improve faster for so many reasons. And then a parent is saying, but that's another child with autism and they've gotten better and we are still at this level. Why? But when there's a community, all of these things are cushioned, because indeed the parent understands that as much as you had to compare to know that there was something wrong, there's a range, you still cannot afford to build a standard for yourself using somebody else's milestones. What I tell parents a lot of times, look out for progress. This child has moved from point A to point B. Do not look at somebody else's point B, might be your own child's point F. But just ensure that on your own child's scale, this child is moving on, this child is getting better. And that's why I say celebrate small wins. A lot of times, what success looks like is too vague, it's too broad. Success is that my child starts talking. That is too broad. There are non-verbal autistic individuals that are doing fantastic. So can we move from where this child is to where this child to the next level? So if the only thing the child can do right is this, can we leverage on that child's strength to improve? If this child is very good at pointing or dragging me to go and get things, it means my child is environmentally aware. Can I then introduce visual support? Can I begin to use pictures? Can I use visual cues to know what this child wants, instead of insisting you must talk, you must talk, you must talk? And even when the child begins to utter words, can I not put pressure on my child, because pressure will do the exact opposite of what I want? Can I celebrate the fact that this child is now blabbing so number of consonant sounds. B, D, even if it's just that. 2 consonant sounds, we're making progress, because guess what? The child wasn't making any blabs before, or was not, I couldn't pick any sounds. Now I can pick a B, I can pick a D, saying dada, saying baba. I shouldn't worry that my child is not saying mama yet, even though I'm the one that's with the child all the time. But the child is saying baba at least. That's a step. So let's move to the next level. So I think that when parents learn to celebrate small wins rather than creating a big picture definition of what success is, it will also help them to manage expectations much better. So I think I'll stop at that. If time will permit, I was going to add to what Amaka said about the things that they need to help the children grow. She talked about nutrition and quality time, which is very key. One other thing is sleep. So many children are not getting enough sleep. Sleep deprivation is trauma to the brain of anybody, adults, children. Of course, it's worse with children, and it's worse still with neurodivergent children. So we need to ensure that these children are getting enough sleep. Unfortunately, parents don't pay attention to this. Some of these children have comorbidities with conditions like ADHD. So sometimes they're not getting more than 2 to 3 hours of sleep all day, 2 to 3 hours all day. And parents are not even tracking it. So they don't even know how bad it is. They just say, oh, I don't know. She wakes up early. You have to track it, know the number of hours, because if it's less than what it should be, something has to be done about it. It's like your child is not eating. You're not going to say, hey, I don't even know. You're going to say, how can I make this child eat? So the same way for sleep. If the child isn't getting enough sleep, that child will not improve whatever it is that is being done. And of course, with managing expectations, with interventions at home, consistency is key. So many times we say we've done everything. But in our head, we did that thing. In fairness, we did it only once or twice. Can we be consistent about this? Can we do it over and over and over? Because every time we do it, it is actually adding up and it is making progress. Not that we do something once. Oh, they've told us that we should do this. Oh, but I've done it and it's not working. Yellow ball and pink ball. The child is not still saying it. That child is not going to pick yellow and pink ball in one day. You heard when I said that it takes up to about 500 times of hearing your own name to know and identify that it's your name. And that's how the human brain is. So it's important that in whatever we're doing, consistency has to be considered. Until we've consistently tried out something and it's not working, we cannot say that we've done our best. I think that would also help us to manage expectations. Thank you.
Wonderful. What's a healthy amount of duration a child at that age should sleep for?
Okay, so
can you hear me,
a child? Yes, I heard you. A child who's like from age 0 to 2 should get up to at least, worst case scenario, up to 14 hours. That's the shortest, 14 hours of sleep. And it can be more, but not less than 14 hours for the age of 2. From ages 2 upwards, it begins to, reduce slightly, very slightly. By the age of, say, 6, 7, the child could get up to 10 hours of sleep. By adults, yes, 8 hours. Of course, a lot of us as adults, we know we do not get up to 8 hours of quality sleep, but somehow we manage. And then, sometimes we feel our heads are heavy and all that, but we're managing. But for the children, they should get the correct dose, which is about 14 hours, plus or minus when they're much younger. And this would move on gradually to about 12 hours, to about 10 hours, but not less than 10 hours as children. And this includes naps. But you see, even if a child is not used to taking naps during the day, if they sleep early enough, they will still get the required amount of sleep. A child should sleep early enough. We should also identify schools around the house. Some children, especially in Lagos and Abuja, they have to wake up way early so that they can get to school on time. All of these things should be put into consideration so that a child is getting a child of school age should get about 10 hours of sleep. But before school, they should get much more than that. 14 hours when they're about 2, and then reducing gradually until they get to school age.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Immediately you said 14 hours. I wished I could be a baby again. I mean, the last time I even got 8 hours of sleep. Thanksgiving were prompted in church. But yes, it's important that we address this conversation. It's important that we point parents in the right direction, recognizing how important something as rest is. It's not something that should be overlooked or something that should be treated lackadaisically. It's something that parents should pay more rapt attention to and ensure that the children get the required amount of sleep. While you were talking, you spoke about communication, and I want to follow up our next question with Madam Maka. Madam, so we recognize that not all autistic children are non-verbal, and once you want to ensure or improve communication in children, there are steps to take. But let's talk about non-verbal communication in autistic children. How can caregivers, parents implement actions that help improve the communication and children who are non-verbal, who have non-verbal communication symptoms?
Great question. Thanks for that, Epic. How parents can work with children who are nonverbal. A lot of patience. Have you ever watched a movie in silence where you just, for some reason, the sound is bad, or maybe people around you don't want disturbance and you want to watch the movie, but like you kind of know what's going on? Like you're tuned in and you can see the characters. It's like that. Um, Language is one form of communication, and that's why people like in person. Like we're having a video call, I could be talking over the phone, but with seeing me, even if it's just this short rectangle, you can kind of feel my emotions. You can see, my gestures and my tone, and you can get a better sense of it. And so with nonverbal children, it just requires more attention to other forms of communication, how they're moving, how they're looking at you, the facial emotions shown on their face, you know, cues that are non-verbal. It just takes a lot of attention to do that. And try and error, because with that can come frustration too, because language is easy to just get what's happening, but when you don't have that and you're trying to still decode, because as a parent you get to a point where you're figuring out what your child needs, and you get to a point where without even seeing the child you already know that this is what they're trying to say or do. So while you're still in the find me phase, find out what's going on, it can be frustrating. So a lot of try and errors, from some frustrations, tantrums, crying, but just stick with that phase, and it gets easier. You get to kind of understand them better. Visuals is another great form of communication that is nonverbal. Get your child to learn how to communicate using visuals. You can I talked about it earlier, like faces and kind of to define how they're feeling or their mood. You can also get pictures of their favorite things or common objects or activities like showering, drinking water, eating, using the bathroom, playing, different pictures that show different actions, verbs that they, that involves their lives. And then when they're trying to get you to do something, you point them, okay, Johnny, can you tell me what you want? Point to what you want. And it might be, at first, they may not want to, they may just keep dragging you and crying and trying to get you to get them to understand, but you have to direct them on how best to communicate with you so that you can quickly attend to their needs. So getting those visual images and getting them to use it is also another great way for non-verbal. Um, yeah, so I think just being present, exploring through art with those pictures, trying what works, by sticking with that phase of trying to decode, and then yeah, just taking it one step at a time. I think when we don't think of it as limiting, oh, I can't hear them, versus, oh, what are they really trying to say? It's almost like a good challenge. I wonder what he wants. You're curious, you have a different attitude. He keeps pointing to the top of the fridge, and there are many things on top of the fridge: his medicine box, the toy that you seized, or some stuff. And he keeps pointing, like, is he talking about inside the fridge or above the fridge? And so you get curious, and bring different options, but make it, your attitude towards it matters. And with nonverbal, I think there's a question too. Should we try to get children who are nonverbal to become verbal by, encouraging them to use words? Or should we just explore within that nonverbal and just accept that they're nonverbal, or that's what they're portraying, and let's just remain there? And I'd like to pose this question to my co-speaker. What do you think about pulling out children, or let's say encouraging them to use words in a good way, or just kind of sticking with that realm of being nonverbal?
Okay,
Absolutely,
thank
that's a
you.
wonderful question. I like how you, Shakira, please go ahead since you got that question.
Okay, right. I think that there's a link between being verbal and being able to communicate in a non-verbal way. I've seen parents that were too scared to introduce sign language to their children because they felt that child won't ever talk again, because the child would feel comfortable with being non-verbal and would not come out. But I've also seen children who started out non-verbal, but because they felt safe enough and connected enough, they eventually began to speak. Because what I have seen is that safety, it brings about a lot of results. So if what the child is comfortable with now is signing or pointing or using visual cues, please let's go ahead and use it. And eventually the child will transit to becoming verbal when the child is ready. Let me use the word is ready, even though it's not that the child is refusing to speak, but when the child is psychologically and physiologically ready, the child will begin to speak. So then I know the question comes, what about those that don't ever speak? The truth is, those that do not ever speak were able to get to the level that they got to because we were able to allow them to be non-verbal. Otherwise, they would not even have been able to communicate at all. So I would say, let's open up the doors of communication. Let's not shut down completely because we're afraid we want the child to come out through this door. So if I open this door, this child will never use this other door. Who says? If the child feels safe enough, the child would explore other options. And the child, once they've gotten one, they won't lose it. So I would say that, and I've seen this work. I've seen this work a lot. let's start with what the child, let's follow the lead that the child is giving us. It's individualized learning at the end of the day.
Education plan.
A will not work for child B, yes. So let the child lead us. Let's see what this child is up to. This child wants us to use visual cues or to use sign language. Let's go ahead and do it. And then when they feel safe enough and they feel accepted enough, then who knows? They might just become verbal. But if they never do become verbal, it would have been worse if we never opened the door to nonverbal communication. That's what I think.
Beautiful.
Very well
Beautiful.
said.
Absolutely beautiful. Madam Maka, I want to believe she did justice to that question. Are you okay with that? Any follow up?
No, I think what I got from what she was saying is that because we shut one door doesn't mean like reinforcing one way doesn't outrightly take away the other way, because I think there's that fear of like, I want to be hopeful, but I want to respect where they are. And how do I balance that and be a good parent? But it's like, if they're very much nonverbal now, go with that. Go with the flow. You don't have to be in despair that they will never be verbal. Like, you get comfortable enough, get safe enough, and one day they're interested in speaking, and woo, it's my happy day. And then you go ahead for that. Yeah.
Well said. Well said. Generally, a follow up to a lot of things you have said. You addressed significantly the picture exchange communication system and using that as a mode of communication for nonverbal children. I think we have a question for you. But I want to save all the questions and take them later so I don't lose my own chain of thought. But yes, whoever asks a question, Kira, I want to follow the conversation with you at this point. We recognize that we've spoken a lot about parents and caregivers that revolve around the home, and we recognize that it is not raising a child, as you said. It's a community's role. It's not a responsibility of just one person, right? So for children who are regulars at intervention centers, how can we foster collaboration between the parents at home and the educators at intervention centers or the therapists at intervention centers? How can we foster collaboration between both parties to ensure that growth of the child is maximized efficiently?
Okay, is that question for me?
Yes, it is. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes, I got the question. Well, I think that one of the things that we can do is at the initial stage, the goal setting should be done together. Too many times I see educators do their thing because they think, oh, parents are just the parents. No, they should be well carried along. If we're going to build a plan like an IEP, for example, we should have an IEP goal setting meeting where we set out the goals, and that also helps parents to manage expectations. And then we need frequent feedbacks. The home should have like a kind of checklist where they're reporting to the center and telling them what the child is doing at home, what changed, even sleep checklist, the nutrition checklist. Give them a chart, because again, parents can be very funny. They'll tell you, oh, I can't remember. So, but with checklists in blueprints, let them tick off. Or if educated parents, it can be Google Sheets or something like that, where they put a note down or they check off something. How many hours did this child sleep? What was the eating like yesterday? For how long did he, did he throw a tantrum? Did he do this and that? And then give tasks as well. Because you see, again, one of the things that I've observed, especially with autistic children, is they make good progress at the centers, but they're totally different at home because they know the home would allow it and nobody knows or cares. They don't even know their ability. So I've seen situations where centers have had to send videos or pictures of what their child can do to convince parents that this child can do more at home, because the brain is always looking for how we can be safe. And if the brain has its way, it doesn't want us to ever get into danger, you know. So if a child sees that the home front is not challenging him or her in any way, he just stays back and pretends not to be able to do anything. So it's important that centers and parents collaborate together and they're on the same page and they're checking. Parents should not just think, oh, I've paid or I got sponsorship and it doesn't matter. What is going on? Ask questions. What can my child do now? What is success looking like? What's the next big deal for us? What's our next short term goal for our IEP? And how can we get involved? And the center too should do the same. Parents, how's this child doing at home? What are you? And that's why centers should also ask about things like sleep and food, because sometimes, because there is a standard, the parents will bring the right thing to the center, or even some centers go as far as providing the lunch that's healthy and all. But these children go back home and they take fizzy drinks and they take all the things they're not supposed to. But when there's a collaboration, all of these things can be prevented. And what we would have usually is better results. I've worked with some children that I saw amazing result. And the simple reason was parents' collaboration was top notch. So it's important for parents to know. In fact, I would say that centers should begin to interview parents, whether it's paid or free service. They should interview them and let them know this is not just drop your child in a center and move on. It's not business as usual. This is something that we need to put our hands together to get good results, and we can achieve it if we do so, so, and so. Because again, some of these parents will come and accuse the center of doing nothing. Meanwhile, they are the ones messing up the work that's going on because they're doing the exact opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. So hopefully this helps.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. I love how from the beginning of your rendition, you already said that the IEP should be curated with both parties involved. And that is very important because it gives a target which the educators and the parents can look forward to. And also, as you said, it helps to manage expectations when it comes to parents. So that is wonderfully said. The checklist idea and the home checklist idea, absolutely amazing. These are things that centers can implement, and definitely, we are sure that children. Madam Maka, let me come to you. We're wrapping up in a bit. We've been on here for about an hour, 15 minutes. So wrapping up in a bit. But let's talk about the emotional development of children living with autism. How can caregivers, parents, help amplify the emotional development of children living with autism? Because I recognize that when a child is living with autism, there are so many things that they need to learn. The emotional aspect of their growth is neglected. People tend to ignore that because for some reason they say a child that has not is not communicating properly. Why do we care about how they feel and all that? But that's an important facet of the child growth, foster the emotional development of children with autism.
Yes, that's a tricky question because the whole idea of the autism disorder is difficulties with emotional and social communication and understanding their emotions, expressing their emotions, regulating their emotions, understanding the emotions of other people, decoding how people express emotions, connecting with other people. So, as one would say, okay, that emotional aspect is missing. And so, why is that a topic of contention? Why should we even give it any thought? The truth is that autistic people do feel emotions. They have emotions, just like all of us. I mean, that's why we're all humans. Now, the what happens with that, how they express it, and all the subsequent convergence of that emotion is kind of where the difference lie. And so because they do have emotions, then there's something to work with. So how do we help autistic children navigate that emotional space? Because they do have and they will always have. Helping them recognize that they have emotions, that these things that they are feeling is emotions, and labeling those emotions. So I think it comes down to using words, helping them know that, oh, you're crying because you're sad. You want another candy, but it's already past 9 and it's bedtime. You can't have another one. I know you're sad and you want to throw yourself on the floor and hit your head on the wall, and because you're feeling that intensity, and you don't know what to do with all that. So helping them label those emotions and regulate themselves. So there's some autistic children that in as much as you're sensitive to sensory extremities, but they also like certain sensory feelings. So if they have like a soft doll or a soft cloth that sort of helps them calm down, you bring it to them. So okay, hold Teddy for a while you calm down. Hold Teddy and just sit here, and you feel better, and just give them Teddy, and usually they would respond to that if it's something that makes them feel calmer. So what you're doing is you're guiding them through that intense emotions that they're feeling and they don't know how to regulate and express. So you have to teach them how to do those things, labeling those emotions, regulating those emotions, and now expressing those emotions in a, will I say, in a way that the other party can understand. That's where the empathy comes in, and it's really about learning. That's where the hard work comes in, and you're teaching them that, if you hit your sibling, it hurts, and you shouldn't hit other people. How do you get them to know that that's a wrong behavior and they need to stop that? So I think actions and consequences in that state. Like if you hit, then you don't get to play because you're not safe. And perhaps you can move the child to another room. And over time they realize that, oh, if I do this, this is what's going to happen, and I don't want this to happen, so I'm not going to do that. And it may take a minute to figure that out, but once they figure it out, they avoid those behaviors. And then positive reinforcement is a strong one. They use this in ABA, applied behavioral um, therapy for autistic children. And what that happens is that they kind of positively in reinforce behaviors that they like. So if the child does something that is good, they praise it. They give them something, 10 smiley faces, and maybe when they get 10 smiley faces, they get to eat that ice cream or something, that's rewarding. And so the child is always geared towards that, happy, positive feeling, or trying to achieve that. And so they stay into that, positive direction. That's also a way of managing behaviors, and also regulating their emotions towards not being overly aggressive or not hurting themselves, or knowing how to empathize with others in a way that, okay, if I don't really understand this whole thing, I understand that if I do this, I get this, and I like getting this, so I'm just going to kind of keep doing that. But we would really need to calm down and work with them in breaking the ice of getting to um, be emotional in a safe way through regulation, and also understanding other people's emotions, which is very difficult for them. It's very difficult sometimes for an autistic child to realize that the other person is feeling all these things that they're also feeling. um, but again, it's a spectrum, so depends on where your child is really, Because when you see older adults now, they have relationships, they're capable of loving others and being loved, and they've gone ahead to get married and have children, and they're thriving in their family lives, but they're also living with autism, right? And they may have some difficulties here and there, but they have that capability. One, they have grown. Two, they're on a different end of the spectrum. So there is hope, even if you feel like your child is really not, doesn't get that emotional connection. And for some parents, it hurts because it's like, oh, my child has never looked at me like in a loving way. My child has never said, Mommy, I love you. My child will not randomly come and give me hugs. My child is aloof. My child just wants to play by himself. My child, and they kind of feel bad, right? So I'll just say be patient, help them, understand emotional, keep showing emotions to them. And whenever they are showing their emotions or expressing their emotions, help them regulate and then guiding them to that. And hopefully over time, they grow into adults who are capable of navigating those emotions, even if ordinarily something that is difficult for them to do.
Very, very pragmatic there with those ones, because I like how you articulated the importance of being able to express emotions verbally, right? So when a child feels some kind of way, you highlighted the importance of defining that information, that emotion rather, and just helping them express and walk them through the process of what they feel carefully, so they understand and recognize how to act based off of that emotion. And that helps with regulating those emotions and helps to manage tantrums and all that. That was wonderful. That was wonderfully said, Madam Mamaka. We are wrapping up in about a few minutes. I want to ask Madam Shakira this last question, right? Not exactly the last question. So, so there's a common factor when it comes to children living with autism. Most children living with autism, a lot of times they tend to have siblings who are neurotypical and normal, right? So this scenario where I have a sibling who's on the spectrum, for the neurotypical sibling, there are a lot of things that they have to deal with. They have to learn to manage emotions. They have to learn to be careful with that sibling. They have to learn to understand that if that sibling is being treated more, or more attention is being paid to the neurodivergent sibling than it is to them, they have to recognize that it's not from a place of more love from the parent. It's just necessity that it warrants, right? How can parents help their neurotypical children understand that the neurodivergent child should be shown more love, should be shown more care? And how can parents help navigate managing the neurotypical and neurodivergent child in a way that it doesn't breach some certain form of, animosity towards each other? That is one. Also, how can neurotypical siblings equip and empower themselves to understand that their neurodivergent sibling is not one to be embarrassed about, right? It's not one to be looked down upon. How can neurotypical siblings be forced to learn the responsibility that they have to protect their neurodivergent sibling in public when it matters, and when
Okay, thank you very much for your question.
when it matters, when it matters.
Okay, let me start by saying that I believe every child needs to be loved and needs to be shown respect. So I don't think that neurodivergent children need more love. I think they just need more support, and that requires more resources. So I think that's one thing that we have to make clear. I'm not sure any child would want to know that, oh, my mom loves this child more because he's autistic, or my dad loves this child. I love all of you equally. you're all important, but because your brother is autistic, we need to help him achieve certain things by doing certain things. And I think that a lot of the concerns you've raised depends almost entirely on the parents. Because a lot of times when we see neurotypical children that are not comfortable with their neurodivergent sibling, it usually stems from what they've seen with the parent. When a parent is too embarrassed to take the child out, or when the parent behaves towards the child in a certain way, when a visitor is coming in and they say, take your brother in, take your brother in, that child has learned that my sibling is a disgrace and I have to hide him as much as I can. Children learn from us. So parents need to model that relationship that they want between the children. And children they're like a plain slate, tabula rasa, from day one, especially if your neurodivergent child is the oldest child. The others come in and meet him. He already exists or she already exists. It's easier. So you just go about to say, you know what, your brother's got a condition called this. This is how he presents. This is how he must do it. Parents that do not know exactly how to state it should buy books. There are a lot of lovely books that you can buy and talk to children about it. I have a 7-year-old and he's read a lot of books about autism, about cerebral palsy, children books. So he understands those conditions. He doesn't have a sibling with the condition, but he understands it perfectly. And when he sees children with this condition, you would see him, he's able to interact with them. He wants to make friends with them. He wants to hold their hands because he knows about it and there's nothing to be ashamed of. So parents should also look for this kind of books. Some of them I picked up randomly in bookshops. It wasn't as if I was looking out for them. So these books do exist, maybe not a lot, but they exist. So they should ensure, and if they can't lay their hands on books, it shouldn't stop them, but they should ensure that they feel comfortable with the child so that the siblings can see them and they can model that behavior, and they can also learn to, see that there's no big deal. Your brother or your sister is different, but doesn't make the person less of a human, and this is how you should behave towards them. Most times you don't even need to tell them how to behave. They've seen how you behave towards that child, and that's exactly what they'll do. And even if the neurodivergent child is coming in later on, and there are already other siblings, they should be told. As soon as there's a formal diagnosis, call for a family meeting. It's nothing serious. They're your children. Call them. But a lot of times parents themselves are dealing with denial, and even when they eventually accept, they're still bitter and they don't think they should carry the siblings along. And that's why I said parents themselves need emotional support. But when the parents are eventually able to come around, they should call the children and have conversations with them. So your younger brother has got this condition, or your younger sister has got this condition, not from a place of pity, not from a place of, oh God, what bad luck, from a place of we have a joint responsibility. There's certain times that I've recommended things like screen eradication for families, and you would hear, we can't do that, or the siblings will not agree. Like, what do you mean the siblings won't agree? They should be well carried along. They should already know that they have a sibling with a peculiar situation and they might have to sacrifice some things. And, depending on how you brought up the children, they'll be the ones suggesting, mommy, we can do this. Oh, daddy, we can also do this, because you've carried them along well. So I think a lot of it lies on the parents and how they handle it. And of course, the confidence also that they use in talking about this, when they're talking from a space of pity, a place of see our life, we'll see where we are now. The children too will
disadvantage.
Yeah, and they also feel the same way.
Well said, well said. I like the responsibility that you have placed on the parents, recognizing that as the head figures in the home, it's their paramount responsibility to relate with the child who is neurodivergent, exactly how they do with the neurotypical, and explain articulately to the neurotypical children to help them understand that the neurodivergent child is different, not less, but different. we'll wrap up with, at least for my end, we have some questions which I'll take in a few minutes. But from my end, I think I have two last questions, one for later. But here I'll ask this to Madam Maka. So we've spoken extensively about early childhood development, and I want us to finalize by touching this very key factor, right? So there is early intervention centers which are necessary for children after early diagnosis, children who are young. At what point would you say is healthy? Because one very recurring question parents ask when they bring their children to center is, when can they go back to mainstream schools? That's usually the goal, right? At what point would you say, in the development of that child, would you encourage that yes, this child can try a mainstream school? And how would you admonish mainstream schools to prepare themselves for a child coming with special needs and being able to accommodate the needs of that child adequately?
That's a very important question for parents who are, at that level of, okay, trying to reintegrate the child back to, normalcy somewhat.
Mainstream.
Yes. I will say that when a child is in a special program or a center, the center should have a benchmark for graduation, call it graduation, but a certain level where the child gets to, that they're good to go. They're good to go to mainstream. They're good to go to integrate with their peers who are not necessarily on the spectrum, and until the child achieves that, they should continue to get the help and support they need. So it's almost like it's goal oriented. It's the center. It's not just, oh, let's keep coming and seeing how. No, we hope that at 6 they have gotten to this level. So as a center, as a school, I'm working towards getting them there. So there's conscious effort. Is there's an intentionality to their special education plan, to how they're progressing. Are we making progress? Okay, can we estimate by this time, based on the progress they are making, that they would have gotten here, and by here and here we can, potentially graduate them and they can reintegrate. So I think every program should have a kind of landmark, and when the child achieves that, based on the continuous progress, with special intervention they should achieve, then they'll be ready for school at that point. And now when they get to school, I, it's not every school that honestly has the sensitivity to children with living with disability. And it's also dicey because some parents are like, oh, I don't want my child to be treated different, I just want them to be there. So they should even go to like those kinds of schools so that they would um toughen up, or they will just blend in and stuff. And sometimes it backfires. You take the child to school and they're calling you like, oh, we can't have your child, or we don't know how to handle this, so, or they mishandle it, which is even worse, bullying and just things you don't want to deal with. So I think picking the right school is also important. Having a school that has the knowledge of where your child is coming from and where they are going, and you know, giving them the opportunity to be with, pairs, typical pairs, which I think has some benefit because, the interest in trying to copy or to see other children doing something can also influence the child to sort of mirror those behaviors, which can help them, be more, will I say, more integrative into being around different kinds of people that are different from them, typical or atypical children. So picking the right school, that I'll say school that has some knowledge, because I think just throwing a child to a, oh, we don't deal with children with disabilities, and then you find a child finds themselves there. I don't know how that would be. I feel like that would be quite scary and like dangerous, because You put them in the classroom where other children don't even know what is happening. But at the same time, you want other children to not be like, you want the child to not, that's the purpose of getting them into a school so that they have that opportunity to mix with other kinds of children. I think it's tricky, but I think, like I said, a school that knows where they're coming from and who are going to, yes, be sensitive to their condition, but also giving them the opportunity to learn and to bring out their full potential, as well as helping them to get to where they're going to, would be like the right fit after they have graduated from their center, after the center has said, oh, the child is able to do ABC, of course being potty trained, knowing when to say they want to use the bathroom or to gesture or to communicate when they want to use the bathroom, because kids are more visual and they like pictures, they like to see, they like to hear, they like to, so that would also help. And I want to say something about speech today. Tongue tie is also another thing um that affects speech today. So if your child is speech delayed, you should check if they're tongue tied, and that's where like the thing that connects to the lower jaw of the tongue is full, so the tongue can't really roll, and it's a tongue that we use to produce speech. And so what they'll have to do is they'll have to like cut it a little bit to kind of make the tongue more fluid and help the child enunciate and pronounce and learn how to speak. So that's something else to watch out for.
Well said, man, Maka. Well said, Maka. Very succinct. Mama Shakira, I'll come to you real quick with the next question that was asked by the audience. I think this is a real life situation. In case of meltdowns, what are best practices parents can implement to help manage meltdowns from the neurodivergent children?
Okay. When it comes to meltdowns, I think first of all, parents want to pay attention. They want to observe what usually is associated with this meltdown. Is there a certain time of the day? Is there a certain, the child is eating a certain kind of meal? What could it be? So asking these questions will help parents better to reduce at least the number of meltdowns. And then when these meltdowns happen, one of the things that parents need to know is that the child should not be choked. The situation should be made worse with pressure. It might be outdoor, and sometimes parents are like, "Oh, I don't want everybody to start thinking I've spoiled my child, or this child is not well mannered." But that's secondary. At that time, this child is having a meltdown. You already know the kind of meltdowns that your child would usually have. You know what the triggers or what the things that could worsen it could be, and that's what you want to focus on at that time. And that's where communication comes in. Communication is very possible irrespective of the level of neurodivergence of the child, and even something as simple as just eye contact or even facial cues or gestures can help. But it can't help if it's not something that you've been using before now. So you need to identify what the triggers are. You need to identify a way to connect with your child when they're having meltdown. If for whatever reason you're not able to achieve that, at least allow that child. So for example, let's say that you've observed that this child usually has a meltdown on a certain day of the week. Then you want to ask yourself, what do we eat? Do we have a timetable at home? Does a particular child who they discovered that was whenever he ate spaghetti, he would have very severe, serious meltdowns. He's disturbing everybody. He's unable to sleep. He's screaming, just going from room to room. Somebody just said, this happened last week, Thursday. This is happening again on Thursday. Can we just pay attention to see if this is every Thursday? And at the end of the day, they observed that the only thing they could link with Thursday was spaghetti days. And when they did cut out spaghetti from his diet, there was a significant improvement. So you want to look out for that. Then you also want to look out for the things that could soothe your child during meltdowns. So what does the child want? Does the child just need to hold you and feel safe? Sometimes you don't have meltdown because they feel unsafe, because somebody did or said something, or because the environment is unfamiliar. So when you already know your child and you know what that this child is having a meltdown? Does he or she need to hold me, or does need to just hold on to something? You might have fidget toys already that the child can use to soothe. So you want to look for a soothing object to help that child to manage that meltdown better. But whatever happens, it will be that it's something that you've tried out. And for meltdowns, you just want to try different things. But whatever happens, please do not panic. When you panic, you're unable to help yourself improve on managing meltdowns. When you're calm yourself, you figure out what could have caused it. You figure out what could soothe it, even when you can't figure out what causes it. So if at least I can know what can help my child to soothe, then I will be able to manage this entire episode better. So I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. It definitely does. I love how you've highlighted the importance of observation. Observation plays a very key role, paying attention to the cause of the meltdown and paying attention to whatever response that they respond to while having that meltdown. I have a follow-up question for you, Madam Anyola. I think this was asked by one of our listeners in the audience, and they said when we spoke about moving the child to the mainstream school, how can we ensure that the child, after being moved to mainstream school, does not regress? Because this is a recurring thing, right? People think that the child has made progress and has now made it to a mainstream school. But how can we ensure that they keep making progress onward from there and not regress going forward?
Okay, let me shock you with a reality that we all know, but we don't remember. Life is mainstream. There's no special life. There's no special situation. So this child will always be with neurotypical people. So the reality is that they should return to mainstream school. And the question of how would we ensure they don't regress should be coming from a place of making it work rather than escaping from it. So the IEPs should also continue in mainstream schools. Mainstream schools need to become more inclusive. I've seen schools that tell you, oh, we do not accept any form of neurodivergent children. I said, hello, this is 2025. We cannot operate at this level.
25.
Every school should be inclusive. Every school. Because, okay, if you don't want to include children that are neurodivergent, what about children that have behavioral issues? You can't see those ones upon admission. Are you also going to exclude them? At the end of the day, you want ready-made perfect children. So what's your job then? What are you doing? These children were going to succeed anyway. So it's important that schools adopt the inclusive policies, and the individualized plans still continue. So the child might be with his or her classmates all day, and then maybe 1 to 2 hours pulled out of class, so that these other things can continue and the child would not regress. And because we're taking notes and we have checklists that we're ticking off, we can easily tell.
Well said, madam. Well said, madam. I love how there's something we do at our center when we send children to mainstream schools. We adopt a method where it's shadowing, basically. So we have a therapist follow up and just monitor to ensure. This is also one way that we try as a center to ensure that we are keeping up with these children and just ensuring that the regression does not experience. But I love how you have said that the world is mainstream, right? So for these children, those plans have to still continue because they experience the world on a daily basis. I think I've heard you guys question. I think some people have referenced this, so I'll wrap it up as my final question. If you could say, and this is for both of you, if you could say a word to a parent whose child has just been diagnosed, what can we say to them to assure them that progress can be made going forward? What words of encouragement do you have for that parent or those parents to see and be interested in embarking on this journey with their children to ensure that early childhood development in that child is fully implemented and maximized? Madam Maka, you can go first.
I would say take a moment, breathe in, and breathe out. Everything is going to be all right. Your world hasn't ended or collapsed, and the future you have or you dream of, you wish for, is still attainable. I would also say you should think about success and what that really means. You should redefine success. You should come out of the typical way of thinking and expectations, but look outside the box for you and for your child. What could success look like? I would also say plug into communities that are like you. The last thing you want to do is feel alone. It doesn't help in any way. There are great communities online, in person. Find your tribe and work together. I would say you have the capability to help your child. You're not helpless. You make that decision and you get to work. This is your life and it's beautiful the way it is. Get as much support as you can from your family, friends, your communities, and any person within those that is derailing you. It's okay to set boundaries, healthy boundaries, to safeguard yourself, your mental health, your family's growth, and make sure, try to involve your partner and your family, your siblings, because your child is part of the clan, and so it should be an inclusive thing. But there is hope. There is hope. There's so many successful autistic kids out there. We even had a celebration a few months ago with um Kanyo Chuku.
Can you check it?
The yes, the boy that did the largest painting. So, what's success for you and what could it be? Find out what's special in your child and harness it. And you'll be surprised. They may just be the next, I don't know, inventor of something that we can't even think of right now. And all the best. All the best, truly.
Well said, madam. Well said, madam. You have said all the right things, to be honest, because I really like how you've addressed the importance of finding your community and finding your tribe. Madam Shakira, the floor is yours. I believe you had the question.
Yeah, she said it all. I mean, absolutely. I would say all of those things that she said as well. And then had success stories. When you share success stories, when parents listen to how other children that are going through what their children or what their child is currently going through, it gives them a lot of strength. So I'll just share a lot of success stories and how their involvement is important. So basically, I would say breathe, breathe, breathe. Whatever happens, don't stop. Just keep at it, keep moving, keep thriving, and eventually it will pay off, even when you can't figure out how at the moment. So I think I'll just make it brief like that.
Very succinct, yet very impactful. I want to say a very big thank you to you, Madam Shakira and Madam Mogamaka. It has been an amazing session, an hour, 52 minutes, and there's still so much to talk about. But we have ensured to extensively cover and impact in the lives of every listener on here. And I genuinely appreciate the both of you for finding time to do this with us again. Madam Maka, it's safe to say that we're friends, so we'll be reaching out again for further conversations. Please be expecting us. Madam Shakira, we would love to have you on here again some other time because we would love to tap into this wealth of knowledge that you possess and still continue to ensure that we are doing our little bit by amplifying the voices of people living with autism in our society. This
Thank you
conversation
very
has been
much,
brought to you by
Epic.
AK Foundation for Autism. It is our Lend Your Voice 1000 Voices for Autism series. It's our Lend Your Voice 1000 Voices for Autism series. And we do this to ensure that, as our own means of rendering, of amplifying conversations about people living with autism, we try to ensure that these conversations are had. We try to ensure that people stay informed. And we try to ensure that, we kill any form of stigma that exists by continuing to have these conversations. We run an early intervention center in Abuja. If you have questions or you have follow-up inquiries, please do also reach out to us via our social media platforms, or you can visit our early intervention center in Gwarimpa, and we'd love to have you around and have this further conversations. My name is Epic, and it has been an honor to host this conversation with these two amazing, absolutely exceptional women who have graced us and shared their knowledge with us. We'll still be doing this as frequently as we can. So till we catch you next time, have a wonderful day. My name is Epic. Bye bye. Bye bye,
Thanks,
madam.
and great work for
Thank
all
you for
you're
having
doing
us.
with the foundation and giving this platform and your advocacy and lending your voice. It's very much needed. So we appreciate you. Well done.
Thank you so much, madam.